Let me ask you a question. What if I told you that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been hiding one of its boldest secrets in plain sight since Avengers Endgame? That a single, almost throwaway detail, the quiet retrieval of 4 small vials of glowing red liquid, could hold the key to rewriting the entire future of Marvel storytelling. What if those vials, those tiny containers of Hank Pym's revolutionary quantum particles, weren't just tools for the Avengers time heist, but the seeds of something much bigger, darker, and far more dangerous? And what if the man most of us believe to be dead, the fallen hero who snapped his fingers to save the universe, was destined to rise again, not as Iron Man, but as Marvel's greatest villain, Dr. Doom? It sounds insane at first, doesn't it? After all, Endgame gave us closure. It gave Tony Stark the ultimate hero's death, the sacrificial finale of a man who began as selfish and egotistical and ended as the savior of trillions. But Marvel has always thrived on recontextualizing its own history. Seeds planted years earlier suddenly bloom into world-shattering revelations. Think about Hydra in Winter Soldier. Think about the multiverse reveal in Loki. Think about Kang being teased as early as Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Marvel doesn't waste details. And those Pym particles, those 4 tiny vials, have never been fully accounted for. Here's the recap you remember. In 2012, during the Battle of New York, the Avengers time heist went sideways. Loki escaped with the Tesseract. Desperate for a second chance, Steve Rogers and Tony Stark jumped further back into 1970. There, hidden away at a Shield base, they found both the Space Stone and a secret stash of Hank Pym's earliest experiments. Steve quietly walked out with 4 extra Pym particles. 2 were used immediately, one to send him and Tony back to the future, the other to replace what had been lost. But 2 more remained. That's the crack in the story, the little inconsistency Marvel left dangling. 2 vials, 2 untold destinies. Now ask yourself this. Marvel never shows us what happens to those leftovers. Why? In a universe where continuity is everything, why wouldn't they show Steve handing them back? Or destroying them, or locking them away? Unless, of course, their future mattered more than their present. Unless one of those vials was destined to play a role so shocking, so transformative that Marvel deliberately left the thread hanging for years, until it could finally weave it into the larger tapestry. And that's where the theory begins. Let's slow down. Let's think not just about what the Pym particles are, but what they represent. They aren't simply fuel for shrinking and growing. They aren't just tickets for time travel. They are, in essence, fragments of quantum reality itself, bottled pieces of the fabric of space-time, portable gateways to dimensions beyond comprehension. To hold even one is to hold the power of creation and destruction. The Avengers use them to dance along the threads of time, but in the wrong hands, those same particles could rewrite history, resurrect the dead, or twist human biology into something utterly inhuman. So what happens if one of those leftover vials doesn't vanish into obscurity? What happens if it finds its way back into the orbit of Tony Stark? Because here's the thing. Tony Stark may have died in Endgame, but Marvel is not done with him. Robert Downey Jr.'s shadow looms too large, his absence too noticeable. Secret Wars is coming, and with it, the collision of worlds, universes, and legacies. Marvel needs a way to bring Tony back, but not the Tony we knew. Not the invincible quip machine in the red and gold armor. Instead, something darker. Something twisted by loss, regret, and obsession. Something that mirrors Dr. Doom. And the key to making that leap, the bridge between Iron Man and Doom, could be that final vial of Pym Particle. Imagine it like this: Tony, ever the futurist, ever the man who prepares for possibilities no one else can see, doesn't truly die with that snap. His body fades, yes, but his consciousness, uploaded, preserved, fragmented across the digital ether of his tech, lingers. It's not far-fetched. Marvel already teased his AI presence in Spider-Man. Far From Home. Now pair that ghost of Tony with the last vial of Pym's miracle. A chance not just for resurrection but for transformation. A way to rebuild himself in flesh and blood. But twisted, unstable, scarred by the process. He returns not as the Golden Avenger, but as something harsher. Armored in science and rage, Dr. Doom. But let's not jump too fast. Because the beauty of this theory isn't in the end. It's in the slow unraveling of all the little details. Marvel has been hiding in plain sight, waiting for fans to piece together. Think about Steve's journey at the end of Endgame. When he goes back to return the stones, he has the Pym Particles with him. But the film never shows us his complete return journey. What if one vial never made it back? What if, in the process of returning the stones, Steve encountered someone or something that diverted that last particle into another destiny? Who could that be? Kang lurking in the shadows of the quantum realm? Hydra sniffing around SHIELD's vaults? Or maybe Tony himself from another universe, already fractured by the multiversal incursions? A Tony who sees in that vial not just a way home, but a way to rewrite his legacy. The connection between Tony and Doom isn't as far-fetched as it seems. Both are men defined by genius and hubris. Both rely on armor, technology, and intellect to shape their destinies. Both have egos large enough to bend nations, and both, crucially, are haunted by the scars of their past. Doom's are literal, his disfigured face beneath the mask. Tony's are emotional, the lives lost, the mistakes made, the family he left behind. The last vial of Pym Particle is the spark that could fuse those two archetypes into one terrifying rebirth. But to make sense of how that could unfold, we need to break this story down carefully, almost like peeling back layers of a mystery thriller. In Act 1, we're setting the stage. The disappearance of the extra Pym Particles, the unanswered questions of Steve's time mission, and the shadow of Tony Stark's unfinished story. Act 2 will take us deeper, connecting Doom's comic origins with the MCU's gaps, exploring how Pym's technology could literally rewrite human identity. And Act 3, well, that's where the bombshell drops. That's where Tony's resurrection as Doom collides with the future of the MCU. In Secret Wars. For now, let's focus on the crack in the door. The idea that Steve's return trip left something unresolved. Remember, Steve was tasked with returning the stones and the particles exactly to their places in time. But that's a mission of impossible precision. Even the slightest deviation would ripple through history. What if Steve, in trying to fix everything, made one subtle mistake? What if one vial was dropped, misplaced, or stolen along the way? Marvel never showed us his full return for a reason. They left it ambiguous, and ambiguity is always opportunity. Now picture this, decades later, buried in some hidden vault, that vial resurfaces. Not in the hands of Hank Pym, who's long past his prime. Not in the hands of Scott Lang, who treats the quantum realm with caution. But in the hands of someone desperate enough to use it for more than time travel. Someone who's lost everything and refuses to stay dead. Someone whose mind is sharper than any blade, but whose soul has been fractured by sacrifice. Someone like Tony Stark. Here's where the emotional core kicks in, because this isn't just about making Tony a villain. It's about asking the most painful what if of all. What if the man who gave his life to save the universe returned, but no longer believed in the sacrifice? What if he looked at the world he died for and saw only chaos, division, and ingratitude? What if, with the power of quantum resurrection in his veins, he decided he knew better than the rest of humanity? That he alone could impose order on the multiverse? That's not Iron Man, that's Doom. And yet, deep down, it's still Tony. The wit, the brilliance, the fire, it's all there. But twisted, darkened, amplified by the very power that brought him back. Act 1 ends here, with the question fully planted. Did Captain America's small, overlooked theft of 4 Pym Particles accidentally set into motion the creation of the MCU's greatest villain? Did Steve's noble mission to preserve the timeline open the door for Tony Stark's dark rebirth? And if so, then every victory the Avengers celebrated in Endgame may have been nothing more than the first step toward their ultimate doom. So let's follow that trail. At the end of Endgame, Steve Rogers disappears into the time stream with 6 Infinity Stones and a handful of Pym Particles. Everyone assumes he returned them safely, then chose to live a quiet life with Peggy Carter. But Marvel never showed us how he returned them. No scenes of him sliding the stones back into place. No confirmation of what became of the extra vials. Why leave that blank? Because a blank space in Marvel is not a mistake. It's an opportunity. The theory says one of those vials was never properly returned. Maybe Steve dropped it. Maybe it was stolen by Kang, who has been lurking in the quantum realm long before the Avengers ever discovered him. Or maybe, just maybe, Steve himself made a choice. A quiet, impossible choice. Think about it, Steve. Carrying the weight of war, sacrifice, and regret. Holding in his hand a vial of reality-warping quantum energy. Would he really destroy it? Or would he tuck it away, hidden, waiting for a day when someone might need it again? That someone, of course, could be Tony. But how? Tony was gone, wasn't he? He snapped his fingers, the energy tore through his body. And he died a hero's death. Yet Endgame already hinted that Tony's story wasn't as final as it seemed. Remember the deleted scene, the holographic goodbye he left for Morgan? That wasn't just sentimentality. That was Marvel planting a seed. Tony's mind, his essence, could live on digitally. And if it lived digitally, it could be retrieved. We've already seen AIs in the MCU with near-human intelligence. J.R. Weiss, Ultron, Far IDAY, why not Tony? Now imagine the last Pym Particle combining with that digital ghost. Quantum energy isn't just time travel fuel. It's the essence of existence itself. It connects dimensions, particles, consciousness. What if one vial was enough to bridge the gap between digital Tony and a physical form? Enough to resurrect him, but imperfectly. Twisted, scarred by the unnatural process. That's not Iron Man anymore. That's something else. That's Doom. And here's where comic history helps the theory make sense. In the comics, Victor Von Doom is defined by 3 traits: unmatched genius, physical and emotional scars, and a relentless drive to control destiny itself. Strip away the Latverian monarch costume, and tell me that doesn't sound like Tony. Stark, Tony is already the genius. The scars? They're emotional. But resurrection could easily make them physical. Skin warped by quantum instability. A face he hides beneath a mask. And destiny? Tony has always believed he knows what's best for humanity. From building Ultron to creating the Sokovia Accords. Doom is Tony without restraint, Tony without humility. Tony given the power to enforce his vision no matter the cost. So if Marvel wants to bring Robert Downey Jr. back but avoid undoing the emotional impact of Endgame, what's the perfect solution? Don't bring back the Tony we knew. Bring back a new Tony, a broken Tony. A Tony twisted into doom. The hero becomes the villain. The savior becomes the tyrant. And the MCU gets to keep its most iconic actor while exploring its darkest possible story. Now let's zoom out and connect this to the larger Multiverse Saga. Kang is currently positioned as the overarching villain, but fans have noticed something. Kang hasn't landed with the same cultural impact as Thanos. He feels more like a stepping stone than the final boss. That's because the real final boss may not be Kang at all, it may be Doom. In the comics, Secret Wars is not about Kang, it's about Doom seizing godlike power and reshaping reality itself. If Marvel is adapting Secret Wars, Doom has to be there. The question is, which Doom? A brand new character introduced late in the game, or someone whose face we already know, whose betrayal would cut deeper than anything before. That's where Tony fits in. Imagine the shock of seeing him return in Avengers Secret Wars, but not as the ally. Not as the leader, not as the friend. Instead, as the enemy. The one man the Avengers trusted above all. Now their greatest threat. The emotional devastation would mirror the power of his return. Fans wouldn't just gasp. They'd grieve, they'd rage, they'd feel betrayed. And that's exactly what Marvel thrives on. Emotional stakes tied to spectacle. But let's not just rely on theory. Let's dig into the mechanics. How exactly could one vial of Pym Particle turn Tony into Doom? First, understand what Pym Particles do. In the MCU, they allow manipulation of mass and scale. But more importantly, they open access to the quantum realm, a dimension outside of time and space. In Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we learn the quantum realm contains entire universes, entire civilizations, hidden beneath our perception. It's not just science. It's magic by another name. Tony, obsessed with solving the unsolvable, could use that last vial as a key to unlock forbidden knowledge. He might try to rebuild himself, to merge his fragmented consciousness with quantum matter. But the process isn't perfect. It leaves him unstable, scarred, altered. In comics, Doom's accident with his invention left him disfigured. In the MCU, Tony's resurrection through quantum alchemy could serve the same purpose. And then there's the mask. Doom's mask is iconic, a symbol of both his pride and his shame. What if Tony, once reborn, hides his broken form behind armor, not the sleek red and gold suit of Iron Man, but something darker, colder, more medieval in design, not because he needs it, but because he chooses it, because he no longer identifies as the man he was. He is no longer Iron Man, he is Doom. Now consider the psychology. Tony always feared losing control. He built Ultron to protect the world, because he couldn't trust anyone else. He signed the Sokovia Accords because he believed oversight was necessary, even if it fractured the Avengers. He snapped his fingers because he thought only he could bear the burden of ultimate sacrifice. All of that points to one thing. Tony believes he alone can carry the weight of destiny. Doom is simply Tony without limits. Tony who no longer fears consequences. Tony who imposes his will because he believes he is right. That's terrifying and that's perfect. But here's the kicker. This wouldn't just be about Tony becoming Doom. It would be about Steve Rogers unknowingly setting the chain in motion. Because Steve is the one who carried the extra vials. Steve is the one whose mission left that last particle unaccounted for. Steve, in his attempt to preserve the timeline, may have planted the seed of its destruction. The guilt of that revelation, if it ever came out, would shatter everything the Avengers stood for. Imagine Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, learning that his predecessor's choices birthed the greatest villain of all. Imagine Peter Parker, who looked up to Tony as a father, now facing him as Doom. Imagine Strange Wanda, and the rest of the multiversal heroes realizing that the greatest threat wasn't Kang, but their fallen comrade reborn. That's the emotional power of this theory. It's not just spectacle. It's heartbreak. It's betrayal. It's the idea that the strongest bonds, Tony and Steve, mentor and protege, hero and world, become the very chains that drag the MCU into chaos. Now weave this into Secret Wars in the comics. Doom steals the power of the Beyonders and creates Battleworld, a patchwork planet made from fragments of destroyed universes. In the MCU, replace the Beyonders with quantum energy and multiversal incursions. Tony, armed with quantum resurrection and his genius, could harness the collapsing universes to reshape reality, not because he's evil, but because he believes it's the only way to save existence. He doesn't see himself as a villain. He sees himself as the only realist left, and that's what makes him dangerous. Think about the symbolism. Tony Stark, the man who snapped his fingers to save one universe, now reshaping the multiverse with his fist. Iron Man, the symbol of self-sacrifice, now twisted into Doom, the symbol of control. It's poetic, it's devastating, and it's exactly the kind of storytelling Marvel needs to reignite fan passion. So Act 2 leaves us here, standing on the edge of revelation. We've traced the path. Steve's Pym Particles, Tony's digital ghost, the fusion of quantum resurrection with human ambition, the slow transformation into Doom. We've tied it to comics, to Kang, to Secret Wars. The stage is set. The seeds are planted, but the final act is yet to come, because Act 3 will answer the last, most dangerous question. If Tony Stark truly becomes Dr. Doom, how does it all end? Does he win? Does he lose? And what does it mean for the Avengers, the multiverse, and the legacy of Marvel's most iconic hero? And so it all comes down to this: the Avengers standing against a figure they know too well, but no longer recognize. The mask may be steel, the armor may be darker, but beneath it is still the same man who once carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Tony Stark. Except now he isn't fighting for humanity, he's fighting over it. Not to protect freedom, but to enforce order. In his mind, the sacrifice of Endgame wasn't enough. The world learned nothing. The multiverse fell into chaos anyway. And so this Tony, reborn through the power of that last Pym particle, decides he won't just save the world. He'll own it. That is the true tragedy. Iron Man, the symbol of hope, becomes Doom, the symbol of fear. A hero transformed into the ultimate villain, not because he hated humanity, but because he loved it too much to trust it with its own future. And maybe that's the real genius of Marvel's long game. Maybe Endgame wasn't the end at all. Maybe it was the beginning of a darker chapter, one seated in that tiny detail, one vial Steve Rogers carried in his hand and never accounted for. The particle that could turn sacrifice into obsession, and obsession into tyranny. If this theory plays out in Secret Wars, it won't just be another Marvel twist. It will be the most devastating reversal in the MCU's history. Because the greatest villain of all time won't be Kang, or Thanos, or even Doom. It will be the man we trusted most. The man we thought we had said goodbye to forever. Tony Stark, Dr. Doom, the hero who saved the universe. And the villain who might finally break it.